Historical Hot or Not.
Hello and welcome to Historical Hot or Not. It's the history podcast that has about as much respect for historical and religious precedent as Henry VIII's dick. I am Aidan McCaffrey. I'm a comedian. I am not a historian, and this is...
Catherine Mather, and I am also not a historian, but we are horny for history, and today we are joined by a very special guest. Her name is Mabel Slattery, and you are a comedian and also a scholar of medieval humour. So the best place to be. Hello.
Hello, it's really nice to be here.
We're so glad to have you. Thank you for being a guest. So tell us a little bit about yourself. What do you do?
Well, technically, I'm currently a teacher, but I have been doing comedy in Cornwall and beyond for about 13 years, which is terrifying to think of. And I did my master's in medieval studies at the University of York, and started a PhD, washed out of the PhD.
They sound hard, to be fair.
They are really hard, and when you've got like depression and other things going on, it's like it's almost impossible. And so my PhD was going to be in medieval like humor and comedy, and how we you've always got to be careful when you use the word humor, because people think of the humors, and it's like, no.
Not that.
No word really fits. It's very odd. But yeah, I talk about, well, jokes, medieval jokes, and how we joke, and how we can tell that medieval jokes are actually jokes now.
Yeah,
and
that sounds really interesting. Like, so, because I slightly up, I went to Pompeii, and the amount of dicks that are carved into walls.
Yeah.
And we think that we're so different, and we think that we're better and we're evolved. And actually, I think
Yes, the biotapestry as well has like loads of... It's got like 85 dicks on it. 19.
No, it's not 19. No, it might be less.
I thought it was
that.
more, but hey, you're the expert.
It might be the next 5 dicks.
There's
a few like...
But they're mostly horse dicks, aren't they? And very little minge. They weren't into equal opportunities back then. It's an absolute sausage fest, the biotapestry. Yeah.
Yeah, there's only 3 women at the biotapestry.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's 93 dicks. I've just Googled it.
Oh, there we go. I was close with 95.
That comes from George Garnett, the professor of medieval history at the University of Oxford. And I'm really glad he's doing something good with his time there. That's what's going down at Oxford, people. They're counting dicks on old tapestries.
Yep. You've got to count the dicks. It's very important. I had the first joke in the English language, as we would recognise it as the English language, is a dick joke.
Is it?
Yeah.
So, is it in Chaucer?
Do you know what it is?
It's not in Chaucer. It's in the Book of Exeter Riddles, and it is the translation is basically what is long, hard, hangs at your belt and gets put into holes. And the answer is a key.
Oh, that is good, because I really thought where you were going with that was your dick. Do you know what I mean? Like, there's no real punchline. It's just a literal description. And then I thought, well, it's playing on sword, right? No, it's a key. That's clever.
Yeah, it's a really good one. I really, really enjoy that joke. But yeah, that's the first sort of English joke that we have.
And it's amazing.
And I love that we've not moved on from that either.
We really haven't.
That's it. That is the standard of joke still, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, like, that should be...
don't change.
It should be hack as well, shouldn't it? Because, I mean...
You think?
Well, in comedy, like in stand-up, the three of us will know that something doesn't have to be around for very long for it to become a hack observation, something that is trite, something that lots of people have done. There's a joke. How old's the joke, Mabel?
About 1,000 years old.
1,000 years old, and it's still got the comic potency. That's incredible.
Yeah, I think it's I think that's usually sort of what I try to focus on with looking at like humor and stuff, because as you guys will know as comedians, like the structure of jokes doesn't change.
No.
What changes is what we tip out and in of a joke,
like
culturally speaking. So it's about learning what those cultural markers are, like going, oh, so this is a joke because it has the structure of a joke. What are the cultural markers that go with it, and what can that tell us about what people were laughing at and what people found funny and things like that? Which is very difficult because some things are structured a bit like jokes but aren't, and you've got to kind of tread that line of going and then you have to justify it to academics who, like, academics are either the funniest people you'll ever meet or, like, the most, like, they wouldn't know a joke if it came up and punched you in the face and then waved its stick in your face and fucked off.
Is the joke older than because you said that's the oldest recognizable English joke? Is there like an older one? Is there like one in the Bible where Jesus is like, "What's long and hard and is in your hand all the time? It's a rusty nail because you've been crucified." Is there anything like that?
Hey! There is a really good. I think Jimmy Carr tells this joke actually, which is what makes it even. One of the oldest jokes that we know of is an ancient Greek joke, and it's a man walks into a barber's shop, and the barber says, "How would you like your haircut?" And the man says, "In silence."
Oh, that's incredible! That like even back in antiquity, people like hairdressers were weirdly chatty.
Hairdressers have just been talking for 6,000 years.
That's incredible.
Shut up now.
I trained as a hairdresser when I was a teenager as well, so like that joke hits on a serious level.
So a question that I do have for you is, obviously you have studied comedy through the ages, and there are so many people of the "you can't say anything anymore" brigade.
Yeah.
How have you sort of found the sort of edgy jokes, and how is that? I'm wording this question extremely poorly, but you seem to have the look in your eye that you understand what I'm trying to say.
I know what you're saying, and I think that comes hand in hand with the idea of like culture changing. And really, there are plenty of jokes that are medieval jokes that we would not tell now. Like there's like stuff in like
because of the woke brigade.
There are certain texts that have jokes about like that you're meant to find funny, of like a notion of biological warfare being firing Jewish babies from a cannon at walls.
Wow.
Oh my
and
God.
that's meant to be hilarious. And it's like, okay, so a lot of that, like there's a lot of anti-Semitic humour in the medieval period, particularly in Britain, because they had expelled Jewish people. And they'd done so, and so the idea was to like keep those fires of anti-Semitism soaked so that they wouldn't be tempted to come back, is essentially
and I bet
that kind of.
And I bet the people making those dead Jewish baby jokes were also saying you can't say anything these days, while being paid many crowns to tell those jokes on the biggest stage possible.
Almost certainly. Like, I think that is a thing that, I mean, we talk about it in terms of woke now, but I mean, think about it in terms of like Bernard Manning was saying, "Oh, well, you can't say this on television anymore," and you get that, through time. It's just, and again, it's a bit like jokes, but kind of the opposite, because they're saying the same things, but how they're saying it has changed.
You can't paint anything on cave walls these days without being accused of being a violent racist by young cavemen and women, blue-haired cave women.
Well, you can't say anything about Homo erectus these days, can you?
Shall we remind listeners, and indeed Mabel as the new guest to this podcast, of the format?
Absolutely, yes. So each episode we pitch a potential suitor to one another from the eTrothed dating app. This is a fictional app which we are hoping that will get sponsored to become real. On this app, we'll first have a look at their profile picture and make an objective assessment of whether they're hot or not. Then we'll find out a little bit more about their life and times, and by the end we will decide whether we would fuck them or not. If we would, they end up on the Bear Your Tap Thatistry. If not, we simply ghost them.
We're still joking about the same stuff they were 1,000 years ago. It's true.
Yeah. We are. A dick is a dick is a dick.
Someone probably made a Bear Your Tap Thatistry joke at one stage.
Oh, one question that I did have for you, just cycling back to the tapestry. I always have to stop myself from just saying tap tapestry now.
Me too.
I wonder if it pass the Bechdel test. Were there two female characters speaking to one another about anything other than a man?
It does not pass the Bechdel test, I'm afraid.
No!
Passes the horse dick dill test.
It does.
There are two horse penises talking about something other than female horse vaginas, but this doesn't pass the Bechdel test.
Named after the very unfortunate scholar Mary Horstickdal.
Yeah, exactly. A fine historian, but a terrible name.
There is a lady doctor.
What?
She was.
You mean a nurse?
Have you heard of her? Yeah, a nurse. Whose name was. There's a plaque up, and her name is, God bless her, Julia Ann Hornblower Cock. And I just think if you are gonna double barrel your surname, what two better names?
And that's the oldest pun in the English language, that.
If we're going to go with very, very unfortunate names, there was a vet who lived near me once called Everard Cock.
Did he ever sort that problem out?
My parents knew what they were doing.
So, usually the format on this podcast is we pitch someone to the guest. But you're actually, I think, the first. I can't remember. Well, we don't know what order we're going to release this in, but you're one of the first people we are interviewing who actually is a sort of historian of some kind or studied history to some degree. You have historical bona fides, and we were going to do a redo of the Jane Fool episode from many moons ago. But it turns out you're a bit of an expert on Chaucer, right?
Expert is a strong word. This is the thing. Once you get better at something, you're a bit like, oh God, I don't think you're an expert at anything. You're an expert at absolutely fuck all.
Well, you're
the more you know, the more you know you don't.
You're an enthusiast for Chaucer. Is it Chaucer or Chaucer?
I have been. It's Chaucer. My main avenue of study has usually been Chaucerian humour and how he does his thing. Which so I do know like I know loads about very, very specific bits of Chaucer.
We have touched very briefly on Chaucer because the very first episode we did, the one before Jane Fool, was about Thomas Becket. Now I am not cultured enough to have actually read the Canterbury Tales, but I understand the journey they're going on in the Canterbury Tales is to see the shrine of Thomas Becket, right?
It is, yeah. So the idea was that if you went on a pilgrimage, so the idea is if you got ill or something like that, you would pray to a certain saint, and Thomas Becket was a very, very popular one in Britain because he was a British saint. So you'd pray to a saint. If you got better, you would go on a pilgrimage to find a relic of theirs or a church of theirs to sort of give you thanks. And so lots of people would go to see the head of Thomas Becket. This is also why he's a really good saint in that sense, because we do know that it's his head. Because if you think about it, most relics would have been from like biblical times, and so they're 2000. They're about 1,000 years old at that point, and we don't really know if they're well,
it's like St. Nicholas's bones. We talked about St. Nicholas's bones, and they're 1800 years old. They just don't they can't fully say for sure. They just know they are bones from the region and time he was in.
Well, Jesus has 14 foreskins that were ratified by the Pope. So the Catholic Church has recognised 14 foreskins. One of them is the rings of Saturn. But they have recognised many foreskins. Also, I think St. Anne, who is Mary, the Madonna's mother, has 7 heads that were ratified by the church. So,
wow.
With Thomas Becket, you had a relic that you absolutely knew was his. So, that makes it a bit more...
Because his legend started immediately, didn't it?
Yeah, and so you've got that kind of... You've got that sort of, certainty that you might not have about other relics or things like that. And I mean, relics came in all sorts of shapes and sizes. You've got tiny ones that could be worn around your neck that would have cloth from a saint, and it would just be in a little thing around your neck, or all this kind of stuff. But yeah, you would go on the pilgrimage to see the head and sort of get as close as you can to the head of Thomas Becket and go, thank you for saving me from plague or scrofula or other old-timey diseases.
That are making a comeback.
Yay!
Thanks, stories.
Yay! Let's get a round of diphtheria in. So yeah, that's the idea. Chaucer's pilgrims are heading to Canterbury for to pray at the altar of Thomas Becket.
We should probably do maybe like a superficial assessment of this Geoffrey Chaucer.
Yeah. I should point out he's not attractive at all.
No, but that's fine.
That's our discussion here.
But that's also fine. We sometimes don't physically fancy them; we emotionally fancy them. We're very modern on this podcast.
Yeah.
Oh, lovely.
Yeah, it's not all physical. So we've all got a picture of him up here, and it will be available to you listeners.
If you go in the podcast notes, will contain a lot of podcast apps now will just show you the picture when you download the episode. If not, go into the notes. There's a link to this photograph. This portrait.
Or just pop into this website. It's called Google, and then what you do is type Chaucer.
That's one you're looking for. Is the one of him that is on a horse next to a bunch of writing.
I can see that one. Oh, that horse is too small for him.
It is
far too small. That poor horse.
So what they think happened there was that he was taken, that the portrait was taken and like copied from another portrait.
Right.
And then they went, oh crap, we've made it too big. So they put little legs on him and a tiny horse. But yeah, that is from something called the Ellesmere manuscript, which is I think it's from the Ellesmere manuscript. It's a big manuscript that contains the Canterbury Tales, basically.
No horse dick on this one, from the looks of it.
No, I don't think it has a dick. Which is unfortunate. It
could be a lady horse.
All of the horses in medieval imagery need to have dicks now.
It does look like his legs sort of finish at the knee, and they just have
Again, I blame the portrait paint. I blame the illuminator for that rather than Chaucer. I don't think he actually had tiny legs.
No, and he looks to be driving in his socks here. I'm not a fan of doing that, but each to their own. So he's wearing. What are these? Talk me through his fashion sense, because he looks to be dressed like a nun.
Sort of. He's just wearing a very simple sort of tabard with some red accents going on.
Mm-hmm.
So he's got, I think, what looks to be a pocket on the front of his belt, which has given him. He's got some very big sleeves going on.
I
think those are the sleeves rather than his
enormous
the shape of his arms. He's got a beard going on. He looks pretty well turned out, to be fair. It's a very short, well kept beard rather than something wild and Socrates-y.
I think in this picture he looks like a sort of 14th century Johnny Vegas.
He kind of does, yeah.
A little bit.
I'd go with a larger Paul Hollywood.
Yeah, I can see that, because in other pictures he looks to have the goatee going on, doesn't it? Which must have been very hard to maintain at the time.
Like Paul Hollywood, he did used to present a thing called the Great British Write-Off, where aspiring 14th century writers would compete for his handshake.
Mm-hmm.
Oh man, it's and the handshake would give you syphilis, obviously.
He looks sad in this photo. He's got sad eyes. Was he a sad man?
I don't think so. He wasn't as sad as his big fanboy. He had a fanboy who lived slightly after him, and he was called Thomas Hockleave, and he actually wrote a treatise on his depression.
Wow.
And it's one of the biggest portrayals of mental illness we have in the medieval
Chaucer's,
period. But yeah,
of Chaucer's mental illness or his own.
No, this is Hockleave's depression.
Yeah. Oh wow.
He writes it. It's called My Complaint, and it's how we kind of know that it was sort of to an extent seen as an illness rather than possession by the devil or whatever.
Okay.
But yeah, so he wasn't as sad as his fanboy. Also, he seemed to have been quite. He seems to have been quite cheerful and things like that, because most of the stuff we have on Chaucer is either from his own writings or it's financial records and stuff. So it's very difficult to know what people thought about Chaucer like as a person, but we do know he was wildly popular. The thing about medieval literature that people forget a lot is that medieval literature is written to be performed.
Right.
So all of these poems, that's why a lot of the stuff rhymes. It's why a lot of it's in poetry form, because it is easier to remember.
And I guess people couldn't read either.
Yeah, a lot of people couldn't, although the boundaries for literacy are weird, because literacy literally kind of means reading Latin. So we consider people they considered people literate if they could read Latin rather than just read full stop. So it's quite difficult to know where those boundaries are. But you know, you've got a, you know, it is written to absolutely be performed, and and Chaucer did perform his own work in court. So he wrote for the king. He wrote for King Richard II, who was a bit of a party king.
Nice. Love it.
And like, we know he was a party king because we've got his cookbook.
Yeah. What was some of the recipes?
Well, so the cookbook's called The Form of Curry, and it is the king's chef's cookbook. Nice. And we know that he was a bit of a party king because a lot of the meals are big and fancy and kind of all. We got the first lemon posset recipe from it.
Nice.
And the first egg custard tart recipe.
Wow.
So he liked his sweet stuff. I think there's a gingerbread recipe in there as well. Like, there's a lot of really cool recipes in there. There's one of, like, goose in mesdames sauce, which is like goose stuffed with grapes and pears and like all this yummy stuff, and then you use that to make a sauce, and it's like, yeah, there was some spectacular stuff going on.
And Chaucer will have eaten some of this stuff himself, being a guest of the king.
Yeah, well, yeah, and he would have. Well, he was employed by the king essentially, so yeah, probably would have eaten some of it, and but he definitely performed to the
Would he have been called a jester, or is that like a specific title that, say, like Jane Fool had?
Yeah, a jester's a really specific thing. So, like, a jester is, or and also a lot of these names are also put on people after the fact.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, we know that Jane Fool, it was called a fool because her surname is Fool. Mm-hmm. So she was a fool, which is a very specific kind of, you do gadding about and you do, jokes in a very specific way. But it's hard to know whether that's a sort of a thing. That's a title that's been put on.
With my comedy career, it's probably going to be the case that the title gets taken off me at the end of my career, rather than they go, "God damn it, he was funny." They'll go, "Why was that guy calling himself a comedian for 2 decades?" We're retroactively changing that one.
I think Chaucer was sort of like known as a writer and things like that, but he was a. But we know that he was popular because his stuff is just sort of disseminated in such a big way in that we just got lots of copies of it. So
this is
a lot of the problem we have.
This is pre-printing press, right?
Oh yeah, and actually one of the first things to be printed by William de Worde. William de Worde is the Terry Pratchett character. Wynkyn de Worde is the actual person. One of the first things to be printed by Wynkyn de Worde on that printing press was Chaucer.
Oh, cool.
And so I assume it's being disseminated through performance and just, poor bastards writing the whole thing out by hand.
Yeah, absolutely. And actually, we've got lots of... But the thing is, they would have, written different bits of it out because the Canterbury Tales is bloody huge.
Mm-hmm.
And it was never finished. So you've got... so people would write down the bits that they liked or the bits that they wanted to sell or the bits that people requested. So often the way scribes work is someone would come in and go, "I would like a book, please." And they go, "All right, which book would you like?" It's like, "I would like a copy of The Miller's Tale, and I'd like it spelled this very specific way to make sure that it's spelled in the way I like, and I'd like it with these illustrations." And then some bloke would go off and do that.
Wow. And it was definitely...
actually...
So go on.
And we actually know that people were so if with some scribes, if you've got because the spelling wasn't standardized back then, so that's why all the spelling looks nuts, because there was no standardization. And so we know that, like, the Pearl poet who was writing around the same time, his language is completely different to Chaucer's because he was writing in the Northwest, and then Chaucer's English is kind of what solidified to become the language we have now.
So this is good evidence of why there's two kinds of dictionary. Remind me, it's like one's prescriptive and the other is
descriptive.
But it makes more sense that they are descriptive for this very reason, that like literally written language is formed. It's kind of just people making it up, and then they go, well, this is what the language is now because this writer has written it in this way.
I mean, all dictionaries are descriptive. That is what they are for, and people who think they are not are usually prescriptive fools who just want to go, why are we using these words that nobody uses? Why? My goodness, the word texting is in the language now, and it's just like,
so's the word telegram, because we invented that as well. Get over it.
Well, it's like but it prescriptive dictionaries are more like Académie Française kind of thing, where they make up words for their language and put them in because they don't want to get too English or all that kind of stuff. But it's essentially one of the things that you find in some of these manuscripts is that they have one word spelled different ways in like one line or two lines. So each time it's spelled differently, and that's basically advertising. Look how many spellings I can do.
I really wish I'd known this in school, because when I got told you're not just spelling it wrong, you're inconsistent in your own spelling, I'd be like, I'm just doing it the way Chaucer did, Mr. Smith.
Today.
You told me Chaucer's the father of the English language, so if he can do it, the A-dog can do it.
But it's so that someone who's reading it can they'll go, oh well, I can specify this spelling of here, and and the scribe will do that.
In modern prints of it, then, do they copy that inconsistency, or do they try and apply consistency onto it?
No, when you are transcribing, you have to do it from the manuscript. Actually, I took a whole module on this at uni, so we transcribe as faithfully as we can. Right. But sometimes that's not possible because, let's face it, if you're making a definitive edition of Canterbury Tales, you are going to be taking from lots of different manuscripts, and some of them might be different to one another. So there's like two versions of several of some of the tales, and we have to kind of knit them together as best we can. So we kind of that's up to like paleographers and historians to go, okay, so these two are the most similar, and these two are the ones we think are like the end product rather than an earlier version, and so we're going to use that, and then we're going to tack on like this bit from the bit that's lost because this one's the closest. And so if you've got lots of copies of something that are kind of incomplete or fragmented, you kind of just choose the ones that are sort of the closest and sort of approximate. But if you're real, you love your Chaucer so much, you can probably find, actual transcribed versions of these different fragments.
Oh wow.
But it doesn't sell well. So it doesn't tend to be done. But yeah, so like you can, for your like PhD or master's dissertation, if you were doing like paleography, which is the study of old handwriting, you can actually do something called an edition, which is where you do a transcription and notes for a text, and that's like your book.
Yeah.
And that's like a whole discipline. It's great. I'd love to do that. That would be like, I'd be all over that.
She'd be like, this handwriting's terrible. I can't read this.
I ended up being such a good paleographer because my mum is really dyslexic. So my mum can't spell, but she also can only spell like she spells really inconsistently or uses different words for things. And has terrible handwriting. So I was just like, this is really easy.
You were born to transcribe indecipherable, half-faded text from 1,000 years ago.
It was my favourite one she's done recently. I'm sorry I'm going so on tangent.
No.
My favourite one she's done was she was putting in a bid for play equipment for the local park. And so I do all her admin basically. So I'm like, if she needs like a scribe or a PA or something, she calls me and I come down and get the laptop up. She talks and I just type. But she'd had a go at writing into this thing before, and what she had meant to write was like that the play equipment is going to last and it's going to bring joy to people and this kind of thing. And so she wanted to write this play equipment will hopefully endure for years to come. What she'd actually written was this play equipment will go to injure for years to come.
Perfect.
And because spell check hadn't flagged it, she thought it was right. And I was like, Mum, you're not putting like spike traps at the bottom of the slide. on to injure children for years to come, and I think we can be proud of that.
It was going to be so poorly made, you would not believe.
Oh my
the
God.
Cornish streets will flow with the blood of innocent children. It's going to be glorious. Going back to Chaucer, so he's the father of the English language, which I think is quite hot. Imagine having that much influence, you know. Like, I would be delighted if a couple of young comedians copy me. That's what I'm aiming for.
Yeah.
This guy invented a language that would not only dominate a country, would become a dominant language across the globe, spoken by billions of people. That's making me hard. I'm going to put it out there.
I mean, to even though I'm the one pitching this as a literary historian, I do feel it's important to say that he kind of just used the language that he kind of had, and that just sort of became the default, partly because it was from London, so it was like the heart of trade and stuff, but also because, you know, he was like writing for the king and things like that.
I know Shakespeare introduced something mad like 500 words to the English language. Was Chaucer like that or not?
We don't know, and it's the same reason that we don't know for Shakespeare, because people say this a load about Shakespeare, and it's frankly it's bollocks. And the reason that it is bollocks is because people take a thing and run too far with it. So Shakespeare is yes, the first written source for lots of different words.
I see.
Right.
The thing about the key word in that is written.
Yes.
So is that like
so the likelihood is that people were using those words before, and he's just the first time that we see them when they're written down.
Because his plays survived because they were great. But yeah.
And because they were popular, so they were written out a load of times and printed a load of times. You know, like, hey, Beowulf, we only have one copy of it and we barely have it. Right. Same for Sir Gawain and the Green Knight and the Pearl Poet, and they're all from the same archive. So there's a thing called the Cotton Archive, and the Cotton Collection was one bloke called Cotton, like Lord Cotton or whatever, and he was obsessed with medieval manuscripts. So he collected a fuck ton of them and all put them in a library, and they've all got weird names. They have different names now, but for a while they were known as like I think the Sir Gawain and the Green Knight is Cotton Nero 6, because he had busts above cabinets of like his heroes and stuff. So Nero was on the bust on this cabinet. So it's Cotton Nero 6. And then he moved house. So he moved them when Cotton died, all of the collection got moved to a place called Ashburnham House. Now, in a very fitting course of events, Ashburnham House burned down.
Oh no.
80% of the Cotton collection went with it.
Oh my Lord.
Oh my God, it's so
now,
much.
Considering that the manuscripts that survive, I think it was something like 80%, considering that the manuscripts that survived are the only copies we have of several very influential pieces of literature, can you imagine how many things went that we will never know?
This is like the second most catastrophic thing to happen to culture after the BBC accidentally wiped loads of Doctor Who episodes in the 60s.
Yeah, it's a bit like...
It's not quite as bad as that, but it's pretty bad.
It's pretty bad. But the reason that we know that Chaucer was popular is there's like 30 different manuscripts of Chaucer. And some bits of his writing are written in things like commonplace books, which is basically kind of like a diary / a playlist. It's like people would just write down stuff that they like.
To what extent does volume of something dictate its importance? Because I've got a feeling in about 1,000 years, someone's going to like dig up loads of what they think are manuscripts near Arthur's Seat in Edinburgh and be like, this must have been an important text of its day because there's loads of them, and actually it's just a flyer from someone's shit musical that they did at Edinburgh Festival in 2018 called Brexit the Musical, and they decide this must have been one of the pivotal texts of the day.
And this is one of the problems that we have, and but it's, you know, it doesn't necessarily, it doesn't denote importance, but it connotes like popularity.
It does, and they're the same thing in my book.
We know, And for Chaucer as well, we've got loads of evidence about his life because he worked for the king. And basically, if you worked for anywhere towards the sort of high up, everyone who was high up in the medieval society fucking loved making notes. Like they wrote everything down. So we know like how much wine he got paid in.
Oh wow.
Nice.
Like we know how much wine he got sent. So we know a lot of this stuff. And then there's the fact that he wrote a load of stuff like about himself and where how like accurate it is or how much it's him kind of playing himself down or whatever, we don't. And that's where it kind of comes back to how he looks, because we know that he didn't think much of the way he looked, because but he kind of is sort of amusingly pointing that out, because he's got an envoy poem, so it's like a letter poem, and it's addressed to his I hesitate to say the word friend, I think Scogan. So basically in the poem, Chaucer is chastising Scogan for dumping a lady. And he spends the first half of the poem berating him for his decision, telling him that he's let love out of his life through his stupid words, and then suddenly he changes his tone and he says, now certes, friend, I dread of thine hap, lest for thy guilt the wretche of love proceed on all of them that been hoor and round of shop, that ben so likely folk in love to spade. And what that means is sort of going, now I really don't want you to fail, you know, because I don't want for you to, you know, be spoiled in love, because, you know, you'll ruin it for all us other fat and ugly blokes. You don't have hope. What hope do we have? So he's sort of going, yeah. So he's
more fish.
Yeah, and so he's kind of pointing that out about himself, you know, and
self-deprecation.
It's
big part of comedy.
Yeah, and I think yeah, there's you know, but it means he's kind of mitigating his insult. So he's kind of going, oh, you might be ugly, Scogan, but I'm ugly and fat too, and so like we're all in this together. And it kind of, I like it as a joke, because it kind of says like, oh, I really worry about you, because and then what hope do we have? Like he's saying like, he's not actually worried about him, he's worried about himself.
Yeah.
And I really like that as like it's a good piece of like weird insult humor.
It is. You should have done a roast battle.
Covered. Yeah, it doesn't get covered for Chaucer a lot, but
that's joke. It's a bit like at the end of 8 Mile, where Eminem he insults himself in all the possible ways he could do, so that his rap battle opponent can't.
Yeah,
Chaucer mastering those hip hop battle offs as far back as 1370.
So, weirdly, and I'm going to have to run to my bookshelf. Thankfully, my bookshelf's really close by. There is a poem that is basically an insult. It's not Chaucer, but it is basically an insult poem. And it is essentially an MC at a gig insulting the audience.
Oh, I love that.
So he's the Paul Smith of the 14th century as well.
Yeah, my medieval bookshelf is like really close by. So, the introduction is so long in this book. Like, what the hell? Thankfully, it's the first poem in here. So it's called A Minstrel's Greeting. That was a name given to it later on. So, but he says, is there any good man here that will make me any cheer? And if there were, I would come near to wit what he would say. Will ye be wild? By merry mild, I know you will sing gay. Bonjour. And then he says, I've come on my own. He says, I've come on my own, and we'll get there. Are we doing this now, or are we doing this another day? And, you know, like, so he's going like, come close, come on, like, fill up from the front, like, you know. Sir, what say ye with your fat face? Methinketh ye should be here a very good base to a pot of good ale or hippocras. Truly, as you say, hold up your head, you look like lead. You waste much bread, evermore from day to day. Bonjour. Like, so it's him, like, being rude.
Heyo.
Yeah. Now, will you see where?
Now, please welcome to the stage, Catherine Mather.
Exactly.
Again, we're laughing at the same things 700-800 years ago than we're laughing at now. It's fascinating.
Yeah, I think what's really interesting is like that. Actually, I think that's probably the actual intent of the poem, is why we were laughing at it. We're not meant to be laughing at what he's saying to the people. We're meant to be laughing at him because he's clearly floundering at trying to get these people's attention. So he's resorting to insulting everyone.
That's how I see. Mabel, going back to Chaucer then. What?
Yes, sorry.
No. It's all good. This is fascinating. Where prior to writing, what was his standing in society? Because we've sort of started like almost in the middle. We know he's like entertaining the king. We know his stories are being copied out, lots and lots. Did he start poor? Did he start rich? Was he already the nobility? Where did he come from?
Weirdly, okay, so I'm having to like very quickly also look him up because he did so much stuff that I can't remember it. That's how creepy like and cool he was. The problem is that the problem I always find is that one thing in the sort of when I think medieval stuff kind of dominoes into other everything.
Yeah.
So before you know it, we're talking about everything. So one of the big things that happened in the medieval period was the Black Death in 1348 to 1350.
And for the record, he was born about 10 years before this, right?
He was born, yeah, well, yes, we think about like the early 1340s.
Cool.
Right.
So he was a survivor of the Black Death. And one of the things that the Black Death did was it created the middle class in a way. Like, that's really oversimplifying it. But as far as like I can give you for a podcast, basically lots of people died, so people were able to go, I'm not doing this for that much money, you have to pay me more.
Because that, and that's like, it's just a true thing of economics, which is if the workforce shrinks, the value of any worker goes up.
Yeah. And also, like, he had a, it meant that people could leave their parishes. So back in the day, you couldn't really leave your parish without your lord's permission. If your lord's dead, you can just fuck off. Or another example is if you've got a big family and they've all got a little bit, but they've all died of plague and you're the only one left, you've suddenly got a ton of money. Yeah. So you can go off and buy a business and, you know, and your own land, and you can do that. So it really changed things for people who were left over, as well as giving people a fuck ton of trauma.
Well, that, yeah.
You know,
yeah, but trauma's all right if you're suddenly loaded. We all know that.
Yeah. Well, it's the thing of like, you know, thinking about like how comedy was a huge thing during like the pandemic. Like it was the best thing about being a medievalist during the pandemic was just like suddenly everyone wants to talk to you. You're really popular. They're like, okay, so how does this work with like the Black Death? And I'm like, this is great. Like,
it's a fine line.
Was worse.
Pardon?
The Black Death was worse than COVID.
Oh yeah.
No disrespect to anybody that lost anyone during COVID.
They lost
but
more.
The Black Death was it was 100% worse.
I mean, we reckon. I mean, estimates used to be, and it's still the number that's trotted out, was about 30% of the population. We think it was more 50 to 60% of the population
can you imagine losing that many people, and also the threat of it hanging over you.
Yeah,
and not knowing either why it's happening.
And you don't have Netflix. We had Netflix in the pandemic.
No Netflix to deal with.
All you've got is that one page of like that you stole off a scribe, and like a cat's cradle of string, like he's Tim's brow, the cat's cradle again. Oh, I wish he'd get plague.
I do love how they sort of tied the plague to theatre in many ways, didn't they? Because it was, I guess, it was just a gathering of people. I don't know if this was the first round of plague or
this
if it was subsequent rounds of plague.
Yeah, this is in more like Shakespeare's time. This is towards Great Fire of London time when they shut all the theatres, but they did try and shut everything in the original Black Plague as well.
The OG
and that's where we get the name quarantine from, because it's 40 days of and that's how long ships were meant to hold before they traded their goods, and then people were too greedy, and that's how plague got into Britain. They were merchants were too greedy. They wanted their money now, and brought in cloth, which then brought in the plague.
So Chaucer, how does Chaucer? So Chaucer's like 10 at this point. How does he fit into this emerging England?
Chaucer's 5. Chaucer's 5 when the plague starts.
Wow.
You don't know shit at 5.
So I've got. I'm really sorry to say I've got Wikipedia up because I am.
That's okay.
His early life is a bit hazy for me, but basically we know that his family were vintners, so people who sold wine.
Nice.
So wine merchants. So his grandfathers had taverns, so they were quite well off, to begin with. But his dad became a very, very important wine merchant, and he had a royal appointment, and that is partially because of the Black Death. So lots of the richer people still needed the same amount of people to do the stuff for them, but there were less people around. Right. So, and he was from Ipswich. So
oh, no.
This is wild. I didn't know this. I'm learning shit from Wikipedia today. It's great. So in 1324,
this is usually how
Father John
this is how the Rest is History podcast guys run it as well. Just open Wikipedia and start reading.
Yeah. It says Chaucer was kidnapped by an aunt in the hope of marrying the 12-year-old to her daughter in an attempt to keep the property in Ipswich. Bloody hell, that's a story, isn't it? But yeah,
do you reckon that was weird at the time? Did they know about incest babies at the time?
They did, and there are actually rules against this. There are laws called consanguinity laws, and it applied a lot to like royal marriages and stuff. So it's called consanguinity, and basically, unless someone is like your fourth cousin, you shouldn't be marrying them.
Right.
But people kind of ignored that quite a lot. Actually, that's why that's how Henry VIII tried to get his first marriage annulled, was the consanguinity laws.
No one told the 17th century Spanish kings about these consanguinity laws, did they?
Actually, a lot of marriages did get annulled under consanguinity laws, including, I believe, one of Eleanor of Aquitaine's marriages. So that's the mother of Richard the Lionheart. Her marriage to the King of France, I think, got annulled because of consanguinity. Because basically they just ignored it. It was quite a good thing to do as well, because you could ignore the sort of consanguinity while things were going good, and as soon as things turned bad, you could kind of had it like a get out jail free card from your wedding.
I thought I recognised you. You're my cousin. Yes. All these years it's been bugging me. You're that person who used to come round to our house all the time for family functions. Yeah, that's you.
Weren't you over at Christmas? Like, yeah.
Aren't you my dad's sibling's child? I think you are.
Yeah.
The law was like, you're not allowed to marry a cousin, and the Habsburgs were like, hold my chin. No.
So we know that he sort of like worked his way up through the ranks of royal household and stuff. He was like a page. He was, at one stage he was like a civil servant. At one stage he was like a diplomat. At one stage he was a spy. Like,
amazing.
And this is why he's so great, because he has all of this knowledge from all these different places, because he went and was like a spy. He was captured as a spy, so he really knew like
who by?
And I cannot remember it. I'm gonna look it up again. Captured. Oh, here we go. I was right. He was captured. This is good. He was captured. It just says he was captured.
Oh, okay.
So we don't know during the siege of Rheims. So probably like the French.
He wasn't like building railroads in Asia as a POW.
No, so he was captured, and they paid a lot of money for him to be released. Like, they gave over. So he was important enough to have money spent, a lot of money spent.
So he didn't have like some 14th century equivalent James Bond gadget, like his pen also had a little skeleton key come out of it that could open any door in Europe.
I would absolutely love that. I think that would be. I want that as like a TV show. I want like the Adventures of Geoffrey Chaucer,
the spy.
Like going
Tinker Tailor writer spy.
Yeah, like. Ooh. Yeah, he'd be great. But yeah, he worked as like a spy and a diplomat and things like that. So he was going, and he I think he was in places like the Netherlands, what is now the Netherlands, and like the sort of Belgium, France, and he worked around Europe, just like gaining information. And what that means is that he was not only exposed to the sort of things that the nobles were writing and reading and things like that, but also what nobles and normal people and what people from all over the place were reading and writing and enjoying as their sort of entertainment. And I think that's really important to what Chaucer becomes. And what's also important is where language was going at the time. So you talk about him as like the father of English literature. The reason that he gets that title is because not only because he is known, so we can just sort of apply that title to him and go, well, he's the father of English literature because we actually know who the fuck he is. Whereas like the Pearl poet, who wrote some amazing poetry, was not only from the north, so doesn't count.
That's still the attitude BBC comedy commissioners take.
I know, right? Yes. Anything above like
Birmingham. Well, actually, anything above the M25.
Above
what? Well, it's anything. I was going to say anything above Birmingham and below Bristol.
Yeah.
Yes.
The notion of like Chaucer being the father of English literature. Not only is he from London and we know who the fuck he is, but at the time, language was doing this weird thing. So again, this is big stuff. So I'm very sorry that I'm just like taking you through like a potted history
just
of
say
the medieval period.
We'll rein you in if we feel it's getting too off subject. But it's fascinating.
Please do, because I can't stop myself. It's terrible. This is what happens when you get that, like, it's like the sort of like specialist subject sort of going. It's like, no, this is me for the night now. But
welcome to ADHD history with Kath and Aidan. And we're speaking to Mabel Slattery, who's going to talk about whatever she wants, as long as it's from between the years 1000 and 1500.
The way the English language works is it's a mix of all the other languages. It's a mix of other languages. So you had your sort of Celtic languages that you kind of started with. Then Latin comes in for a little bit of a jaunt, and that's where we get a lot of our military language, and then they fuck off. And then in come the Anglo-Saxons and Jutes, and we get sort of the Anglo-Saxon and the Old English that Beowulf is written in.
Was it 1500s that you'd actually be able to understand people? It was much later.
Yeah.
1600. It was so much later than I thought it would be, and brings a whole new element to Doctor Who as well. Time travel.
So there's that, and then in 1066 the French invade, or the Normans invade. That creates like a 2-layered language system, or a 3-part system, because you've also got Latin in the church. The rich people speaking like French, and then you've got the poor people speaking English, and they kind of start to blend together a little bit over time. But it takes a few hundred years. It takes about 350 years. So by the time Chaucer is a kid, these languages are melding together, and we start seeing actual English literature coming up as opposed to just French literature. So we start to see real English literature. But it's around that time you start to see, like Parliament starts to be in English as opposed to in French and Latin.
Was Parliament speaking English? That feels like something that would be the result of an annoying referendum. People like, why are we speaking this bloody French? We should be speaking English in Parliament. And all this liberal lefties are like, no, we should speak French. It's the language of the continent. And all the right.
It's the language of the continent. Coming back to Chaucer was like the idea that we start seeing this sort of like blending of the languages, and that really has an effect on Chaucer and how he writes. And a lot of what he uses it for is comedy, and why it's such a good language for comedy, and Chaucer really understood this, is because those sort of like higher concepts, very, very quotation marks, those sort of higher concepts are all in French, and then all the sort of lower concepts are all in English. So you can use a mix of like French derived and English derived words to create what's called bathos, so the notion of the move from the sublime to the ridiculous. And that big crash is a really, really common thing in English, where I'm not sure how much it exists in other languages, but it's very effective in English, because you can use, like, there's that Les Dawson joke about, like, I was out in my garden smoking a reflective cheroot, and I gazed up at the stars, and I saw the firmament in all its glory, and I saw the stars scattered across the velveteen sky like diamonds, and I stood there and took in its great majesty and thought, I really need to get this lavatory fixed. And that move is, and actually you could make that even more an example of that by saying, like, I really need to get this bog fixed, and that would bring it right back down to the sort of earthiness. And that's what Chaucer does a lot.
And comedy still does that today. Like, I think about the thick of it the day. Like, they're often talking about, government policy and like serious things that are going to affect millions of people. And then it'll just shift into them having an argument about what kind of biscuits they have in Downing Street or something like that. And I guess it's a similar thing. It's like you make something grand very silly, or you treat something that's incredibly silly in a very grandiose way, like it's the most important thing in the universe. And you can sort of get comedy from coming at it from both angles.
And that's why he is the father of English literature in that sense, is because I can't believe that took like half an hour to come back around to that, but that's why he is considered that, is because he is one of the first people to really realise the potential for this new sort of like combined English.
So he's sort of the father of English. But here's my question. Was he an actual father, which is a way of saying, did this guy fuck? I need to know.
He did.
How
Oh,
did
he
he fuck?
fucked. Oh,
Yes.
He's the father of English
No.
fucking. That's who he is.
Oh yeah. No, so he had a wife. He had a wife called Philippa.
Was he a good husband? Was he a loyal husband? Did he fuck about? What's going on there?
We believe he did fuck about. Actually, there's a lot of So one of the things that makes Chaucer very problematic is that he went to trial on trial for rape.
Oh shit!
The old
And
Wikipedia controversies subcategory, which we're not a fan of.
Yeah.
And it is a huge issue that has only really kind of just been sort of like thoroughly discussed as to whether he did indeed rape this person, this woman. He was quite a young girl, and she was a servant.
Wow.
And
so how, like, that's crazy because you wouldn't go to trial for raping a working class person now, would you? Do you know what I mean? Like, realistically,
it's whether she was. I can't remember. I think she was a servant, but it might. But if she was a servant to someone significantly high up, then absolutely.
I mean, I guess she's their property, right? Like, it wouldn't be her well-being; it would be.
What's interesting is it's actually the father's property, and this is where it becomes a bit dicey,
right?
And well, not for Chaucer. Like it's kind of his saving grace in a way, because obviously, if it was very very certain that he had raped someone, I would not be pitching him.
Yeah.
So what we think is that fathers could bring rape cases if their daughters had had sex without their father's permission. Basically.
Right.
So they could go, this man raped my daughter, and it was basically she did, that it was consensual sex, but he just didn't know about it, and then he found out about it and wanted to get some money or pay back, so that the daughter could be married off properly without her being like a wasted woman.
Yeah.
So we think that's kind of what happened there, was that he was taken, and there are lots of hints within the trial to this and things like that.
There's a thing here. So I'm looking at Wikipedia, and this is referencing the archival iceberg, New Sources for Literary Life Records, which is part of the Chaucer Review. So apparently in 1873, released Chaucer from any legal responsibilities for all matters of actions relating to her raptus. Latin, omnem modus actionis tam de rapto meo. It basically says raptu referred to the illegal transfer of service from Staunton's household to Chaucer's, and that case was a labour dispute in which Chaucer and Championne were co-defendants. Is that referring to the same thing? And is this like a language confusion?
Sort of, yeah. It's not that as such, but yeah, because she was in service, it's a big old thing. It's a bit of a mess. But yeah, it is quite controversial, and for a long time we've been kind of like going back and forth, going, but did he?
Yeah.
And the consensus seems to be probably not. He probably didn't rape her. It was probably consensual sex. It's probably a bit on the line because she was quite young and he was, slightly older. That it's not great on that level, but like in terms of like, yeah, did he attack a woman and have sex without her consent? Unlikely. But I mean, I am not the historian to definitively decide on that, but this is what I know from having listened. Because
well, actually, we've brought you on to be the definitive historian to decide. So,
well, a couple of years ago, there was like a big old like thing on it, and they announced it, and it was on a big webinar, and it came, it was like a whole thing, and I listened to half of it because I had to get home, and I was like, got in the door and was like, oh my god, like typing furiously, like I need to get them to find out this Chaucer thing.
Well, that's why we like having people like you on, mate, because most people are rushing home thinking it's the BGT final tonight, and I don't want to miss it.
No, I know.
I don't have to watch Race Across the World 24 hours after everyone else has watched it. I want to see who gets through to the next round. You're like, oh my god, I cannot miss the Chaucer webinar. I've got to. I am not Sky Plusing that. I am not watching that on iPlayer. That has to be watched live.
It's a season finale we've been waiting for 600 years, for God's sake.
The equivalent of when I found out about Rolf Harris. No.
Yeah. So yeah, it's a big thing. So yeah, it is very likely that he fucked around, and which is a bit shit on his wife, but he does seem to have been. Yeah, I think it is an interesting one.
But there is the other historical perspective, which is lads. So what are you going to do?
I guess it was they kind of did then,
it's
right?
It's really difficult to judge like morality and stuff on of a medieval person through a modern lens like that. Like for any historical period, like it is quite difficult to do. And I mean,
because unless someone's in an open relationship, you shouldn't be fucking about. So the question is, did his wife know? No, but even then, it goes back to what you're saying. You just don't know. You just don't know, do you? Because it's just so long ago. And also because women didn't have a voice then. I'm aware, ironically, that I'm denying your voice by talking over you. But because women didn't have a voice then, it's like we'll never know her perspective.
Like, not in the same way, no. I mean, unless something goes to ecclesiastical court, which is how you really know there were issues. So, like, that's when you want to get, like, your marriage annulled or something like that.
That would be a good podcast. Ecclesiastical courts.
They did have some, you had some recourse to take cases to ecclesiastical court. So, like, if your husband was beating you or treating you very badly, you could take him to ecclesiastical court, and you could, and there would be a ruling as to whether he was beating you like too much. Like, did you deserve to be beaten a little bit?
It should have been 30 lashes for the wife, not 40.
Yeah, exactly. And that was kind of thing. But like, men could take their wives to court for like spending too much of their money, and like, so there's one woman in like one court case, and he's like, look, I'm really sorry, but my wife went on a shopping spree, and they got in all the merchants to come in and go like, no, she spent she's racked up a load of credit, and I want him to pay. And like,
it's Black Death Friday, and my wife's gone mental in the supermarket.
Yeah, so like ecclesiastical court records are great because they're like all the sort of relationship issues that people that you could take your husband to court for impotence.
Wow.
To have your marriage annulled. And actually, the way they would judge this in York in the 1300s, around Chaucer's time, is they would get a jury of women. So it would be sex workers and older women in the community who would have an hour to get you hard.
Oh my God, I love that. That's amazing. Just, all right, we've got 12 women, start making out.
Yeah, and if they couldn't get you hard, then you were declared officially impotent. And
you'd be so annoyed if you'd just spent yourself like moments before and they were like, I can. You just, can I come back tomorrow and do it again?
I knew I shouldn't have fucked that servant. No, but yeah, it's
we should probably wrap up soon. Is there any other like key facts on Chaucer that we should know before we make our final assessment as to whether he is hot or not, as to whether or not Chaucer is going on the Bayeux Tapestry?
I think the main thing for Chaucer is like he's like one of the properly original like funny guys who is like really happy to be like self-deprecating, and he's really happy to like a lot of his work is self-deprecating, and that's kind of what I really like about him. So whenever he's whenever he's narrating something, he's always slightly useless, and I really like that. Like that's how he presents his character, is like, well, I'm a bit of a useless prick, but I'm trying anyway, and I really like that. He also wrote, he's got lots of stuff in his work where women win, which I really like. Nice. Like, it's not your bashing of women fest. It is to an extent because that's just the time. Like one of the, it's a terrible trick. It's I love to tell it because it's so awkward and terrible, but it's definitely like not funny by today's standards. But I still kind of like, it's one of those. It's a farmer is standing in a field when another farmer walks by, and one says to another, "That's a nice tree in that field there." And he goes, "Yes, I've had 3 wives, and all 3 have hanged themselves from that tree." And the one guy comes together and goes, "Have you got a cutting of this magical tree?" Oh my God.
Fuck it out.
You see what I mean? Like, you can't help but laugh because it's so bad. Like, but that's kind of the humour that you're working on. So there's a lot of sort of like anti-women humour, but actually,
also women being victorious, as you were saying.
Yeah, Chaucer writes some quite strong women. The wife of Bath, we're not. It's always a bit like turned upside down as to whether we're like meant to like her, but I genuinely think, like, to an extent, yeah, we are absolutely meant to love this woman who's had 5 husbands at church door, and is always going on about sex and is always being really bawdy. And I think we're meant to kind of like Alison, the wife of the carpenter in The Miller's Tale, who is having an affair, but she's having an affair with like a cool student guy. So it's all right. They kind of win at the end because they're laughing at the the terrible cuck man, and it's like you do get an element of like, that.
Well, that's subversive. It's subversive, isn't it? Like if it's sort of subverting standards of what you might expect women to be in literature at the time, from what you're saying.
It's also really subverting the standards of what we expect from like courtly literature. He's so likable as a writer. You don't see a lot of truly likable characters in literature, and I think it's actually like in medieval literature, especially when you're writing about like such grotesque things and stuff like that. And I think the fact that Chaucer managed to make himself so likable is such a stunning feat for that time, that we still like him. If you were a medieval lady and he turned up, like, he would be innately fuckable because we love a comedian.
Yes.
Like, there is something about that. And also, he could probably treat you because he's pretty bloody rich. He's being delivered like several quarts of wine a day. Like, he could get you drunk. He could get you very, very drunk.
Also, why are they paying him in wine when his family are wine merchants?
Yeah,
I know.
I've got it at home. Yeah. I don't need it.
That has been my abiding question ever since I started studying.
That would be like if they paid comedians in cracker jokes. It's like I write jokes. I want you to give me money.
It will pay you in character and exposure.
What they mean by exposure is they mean they will expose themselves to you after the gig.
Yeah.
Oh god, it's the Louis C.K.
Yes, what a praise.
Yeah, he died in his mid-50s. Was he young? Because I mean, by today's standard, young. But then also, I'm always confused by sort of average ages, because sometimes you're like, the average age was 21, and it's like, yeah, but that's because 8 out of every 9 babies died. Was it that did he die young, or was that kind of bang on, really?
8 out of every 9 babies, it just makes me think of like cat food average. 8 out of every 9 babies preferred death.
To be fair, given the choice, if you could tell me what the world was going to be like as an infant, you'd be like, yeah, fuck it. Sounds well hard, that.
So you are right. That like the average ages are massively skewed by child mortality.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, if you look at death and coroner's reports and stuff, some of the shit that people die of is horrific. Like, so many people die of toothache, and that's like terrifying to me.
Yeah.
As someone who's really anxious about her teeth, like, that freaks me the fuck out.
But then I guess if you get one infection in a tooth,
you could die. Yeah.
If you don't pull it out or get antibiotics, you're fucked, aren't you?
And gum disease affects your heart. So, it is a real thing. Loads of people died of drowning as well. But, like, yeah, especially kids, because everyone was wearing wool. So, if you walk into too deep water, you cannot get out. But, so, yeah, no, childbirth and infant mortality drastically skew that number. But if you lived past about 25... So it's about sort of like, you had two kind of crunch points. You had your childhood, and then you had like your 20s, 30s, which is when any of those kind of diseases like diabetes or, like all those kind of diseases that we get that emerge at that point get you. So like, like the sort of heart conditions that flare up when you're in your mid-20s or 30s. Some people get diabetes in their mid-20s, things like that. When those things become a thing. Or conditions that have gone on for so long, like celiac disease or something. If you had celiac disease back in the day, you were fucked. But you would die. You would die. Yeah, you'd die around sort of like your mid-20s.
Yeah.
So if you managed to get past that, the life expectancy was like 70s. It was pretty fair. And we can guess that Chaucer was pretty tough. What with having lived through the Black Death.
Yeah.
He'd managed quite a good way, but the thing about Chaucer is that, from what I remember, he kind of just disappears. We don't know whether he was like murdered.
Shit!
That's
exciting,
because he dies around the same time as Richard II.
He's just thrown in a pit with him or something.
And we know that Richard II was murdered because it was like a coup in the court. And so we don't actually know how Chaucer died, but we do know that he left his great work, Canterbury Tales, unfinished, and that's
bit like George R.R. Martin and
oh yeah.
Game of Thrones.
Notoriously dead George R.R. Martin. Yeah,
yeah. You were like George, you're well old. Write the fucking last book.
That's why the TV show of the Canterbury Tales just like really tails off at the end because they ran out of stuff to adapt.
Yeah. But yeah, they didn't even make it halfway. Like the idea was they were everyone tells 2 tales, one on the way and one on the way back.
Did they even get to Thomas Beckett's
shit?
What an anticlimax! Did they get?
I know. So yeah, like it does sort of end in kind of in the middle, and that's
as far as South Mims services. And
then, there must have been people going, Geoffrey, you've hit 55. Are you sure you can't do another? Come on, we're still waiting for we're still waiting for the yeoman to tell his tale. Come on. This is also how we know that Chaucer was innately fuckable, because and this is one of my main motivations is studying humour in Chaucer. And it's there's a line in the general prologue where everything is mistranslated, or it's very well translated but not well enough. And it is the yeoman is introduced in the Canterbury Tales through essentially like a series of what are just like ridiculous innuendos about his penis.
Love it.
And it's compared to all of his weapons. His arrows are straight. His mighty bow is in his hand. The dagger below his belt is very sharp. And this dude and Freud would have got along very well if cocaine had existed in medieval Britain. But there's like one line in this barrage of cock that is talks about how he not only possesses this yeomanly tackle, but he knows how to use it, and it is of woodcraft well could he all the usage. And I've seen this translated so many ways. I've seen it translated as like he could craft wood well, he was good at woodcraft, lots of permutations, but they all kind of miss the innuendo. And I am hoping that at one point a copy of the Canterbury Tales will come out which will have that line rendered as he could utilise wood to any purpose.
He's got a big dick and he knows what to do with
it. Yeah, exactly. And I think anyone who can like sort of write that good penis innuendo must know how to use this. Like, he must have some serious woodcraft knowledge, is what I'm saying.
Yeah.
You mentioned that this is how we know he is that Chaucer, Geoffrey Chaucer is innately fuckable. But is he? That's the big question of this podcast. So we're now going to answer that question. We usually start with the guest, but seeing as you've been pitching us to him out, we'll start with us. Kath, has Mabel convinced you that Chaucer is fuckable or not? Is he going on the buyout tapestry?
Honestly, I'm torn, and I'm going to begin speaking, and I don't know whether it's going to be a yes or a no yet.
Right.
But because on the one hand, I mean, he's not what I would find attractive. But, I mean, I guess that he could be old-time attractive, and he does take care of himself, as we said with the goatee. So that is... Yeah, I do like someone that takes care of themselves. He looks like he got good hygiene. And as well, if he's got a bit of money about him, then you would assume he could afford to be clean, right?
And he's kind of portly, so he
Yes, yeah, he can eat. He's got money.
He's not malnourished, so
right.
That's good.
That helps. I also I like a sense of humor. I think that's good. But the problem is, I don't think that you can exist only off a sense of humor in a relationship. I think you do need to want to fuck him a bit as well. Yeah. And I don't know if his sense of humor would be enough to make me want to spread my legs for him. So I think it's gonna be a no. I sound like he sounds like I would like him as a friend.
Yeah.
But maybe not as a fuck buddy.
Friend-zoning Geoffrey Chaucer.
I think I'm friend-zoning Geoffrey Chaucer, yeah.
Geoffrey Chaucer has been friend-zoned.
Yes. He's got a wife, he's fine.
I think I am going to say I would. Yeah. I just feel like he just sounds like a good entertainer and someone who would be quite fun to be around. And because we know he did fuck around, it shows that actually, I guess I'm curious about that. I want to know how a 14th century writer fucks. So,
has he got a dagger that's good at woodwork?
Yeah, well, he's got a big key hanging between his legs, and he knows what hole to put it in. So I'm going to say yes out of curiosity, because he does sound, maybe sounds slightly unethical, but he does sound quite fun. He's very much a shag, marry, avoid. I'll shag him, but I won't marry him, but I will not avoid him either. Mm-hmm. And what about you, Mabel? What do you think?
I mean, this is the worst time to tell you I'm on the asexual spectrum.
To be fair, this podcast, we do use the word fuck, as in like, do we respect them?
Yeah.
Oh my god, I totally like go on a couple of dates with Geoff Chaucer. Like, also I am with a beardy. My boyfriend is quite beardy and very funny. So clearly it's
and your boyfriend is also ill proportioned to a horse when he's sitting on it.
He's got tiny legs and a tiny horse. Yeah, he'll be delighted to hear that when the podcast comes out. So, Doug, I love you for your tiny legs. Your tiny, really straight legs with very odd feet. But yeah, I think that there's definitely like something, like there is something weirdly magical about Chaucer that I do love from like his writing and things like that. So yeah, I think if I got him at like the right sort of about the right age, I'd be like,
so like 1375 Chaucer, but maybe not 1399 Chaucer.
Yeah, and I mean, he's got a lot of stories as well. So like he'd be able to come back and not only relate like stories that what's popular in France and stuff like that, which like all those ladies are going for, but he'd also be able to like just tell you all about like the stories of like what he's seen around the world, and that would be kind of cool, like especially from a medieval perspective, where people traveled a lot more than we thought in the medieval period, but like not everyone did. So it would be kind of cool to hear. And he's got connections, so he could probably like take you on a really nice date. The wine would be good.
Yeah. Whether his own or the king's wine that he got paid in.
Yeah. He'd be So.
Is there a risk with him that because we know from the Canterbury Tales he can start, but he can't necessarily finish. So if that...
Well, that's when we get into 3 of 12 women to take blood in an hour.
Yeah, give him an hour with him and see if he finishes then. Cool. Well, this has been very informative. Thanks for coming on, Mabel. It's been like, this is genuinely a unique episode in the historical Hot or Not canon, because it's the first time we've been pitched someone, and you're someone who's very clearly quite knowledgeable about a whole wealth of history. And actually, the way you talk about history, it's sort of the way I like to experience history. Is like you sort of get animated about one thing, but then that connects to so much else, especially when you're back then. Like, you can get into the plague, you can get back into the influence he had on language, and you can have the influence that all these different European languages had on him. And then, we didn't even talk about Jane Full. We were going to try and connect it to that. It just like connects to so much of history. It spirals off it. It's just very fascinating.
I didn't even talk about the 1381 peasants revolt. Like, like there's so much there.
We're going to cover all of the peasants in the Peasants' Revolt in a different episode and decide whether all the peasants were hot in the Peasants' Revolt.
You should see what Tyler would be a good one for fuckable or not. But yeah, I think, or John Bull. But yeah, you've got I think I love to talk about. I think the thing that makes history so fun, being able to sit with a book that's 600 years old and feel someone talk to me across time, and I think that is such a magical thing to be so privileged to be able to do.
That is the most profound thing anyone said on this podcast, but it's not it's not a particularly high bar, because we do generally just make dick jokes, but it's still pretty profound.
Yeah, but I am reading, it is someone talking to me from 1,000 years in the past, but they are telling me a dick joke.
They are, yeah.
So
great.
And what a lovely full circle thing to end on. Thank you very much for coming on, Mabel. You're welcome back anytime. Thanks.
Thank you for having me.
Our pleasure.
Lovely. Next time we'll find someone We'll find someone really good looking. I'll see if I can find someone from a manuscript that we've got a picture of that's really, really hot.
Well, actually, I like the woman. I can't remember if we were recording at the beginning. You mentioned some woman who's like the first female writer in Europe. She's exactly the kind of
Christine.
She's exactly the kind of person we like to discuss, and she is hot.
I'll come back and do Christine de Pizan.
Yes.
Yeah,
you're more than welcome.
So there we go. Geoffrey Chaucer has made it onto the Bayeux Tapestry. Hooray! Before we go, Mabel, where can people find you? What are you doing?
You can't find me many places. I live in a cottage in the middle of nowhere. No,
love it.
No, I say that I live in a cottage in next to a town. We're fine. But generally speaking, you can find me on Instagram at Slattery. So that's SLATTEROO. It is criminally underused, and I've been telling everyone when I've been on podcasts, and I've been on the Blizzard Comedy Avalanche recently, and I was like, I promise I'll put something up there soon, and I still haven't. It's ages later, so I need to. So I'm gonna at least make the pledge that I will put up a photo from me going to the UK Games Expo, which I'm doing next week. So
amazing!
There will be a picture of something from the UK Games Expo.
That sounds like so much fun.
Excellent. Well, thank you for listening, and
yeah. Spread the word, spread your legs, and remember, it's not what's on the outside, it's what's on the inside of the coffin that counts.
Bye.
Goodbye.
You have been listening to Historical Hot or Not with me, Catherine Mather, and Aidan McCaffrey. Theme song by David Eagle, and our logo is by Richard Todd. You can head over to co-b.com/hotnotpod. Over there we've got some Hot Knot merch. We are currently selling branded condoms and branded badges. Get over there while stocks last.